How's going on, good people? I hope you all had a wonderful MLK weekend. It's a great start to your week so far. As always, for full attendance, put yourself on camera. You don't have to be. You can still stay if you feel like you're not having like the best hair day or something. Or you got a little, crustiness in your eye. But I do encourage you to, continue to engage. But for full attendance, again, you will need to be on camera. I hope everyone was able to get access to the book this weekend. If not, please make sure that you do so. I sent the email giving you the correct course key. I apologize for what was in the syllabus, but please make sure that you access this and start to utilize it as quickly as possible. It is challenging to do as well as you should if you're not reading. At the end of this chapter, I want you always to have a good sense of what you should be able to do. And a lot of times, Michael, people breeze past this part, and it just becomes kind of white noise, but it's really important for you to get a sense of what you're supposed to be doing at the end of each chapter. Again, I don't expect you to have all these concepts mastered, but it's really hard to master them if you don't have an understanding of what you're supposed to be doing. So we want to be able to define social psychology and explain how it's different from other social science perspectives by the time that we're done with this chapter. I would expect you to be able to discuss how human beings interact on the basis of shared meaning and through the exchange of symbols. I want you to be able to discuss if human behavior can be measured like the biological sciences. So what are some like in natural sciences, right? What are some common measurements that we use in natural science?
Like,
go ahead, Michael.
Like when you're measuring something in science, like you want something like that.
Yeah. Yep. Anything at all.
I mean, they use like liters, milliliters, stuff like that.
Good. What else? Like if you go to the doctor and you say that you're in good health, what are some measurements that you might use?
You might use like your weight or something. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Weight, that's one.
What's the other thing? Oh, they might check like your heartbeat.
Good. Your heart rate.
Blood pressure.
Blood pressure, yep. They might do the blood count even. Good. So in behavior, right, we believe that we can measure stuff like that as well. That if I believe, Aisha, which I do, that I am my parents' favorite and they love me the most, how can we measure this? Anybody? No answers.
I would say you can go.
Oh, I would say like in the amount of attention that they show you versus the other siblings.
Good. Jakira.
Definitely just picking it back up. Like if you're spoiled and stuff, you can definitely like look at that. And if they talk about you a lot and brag about, you to their friends and, oh, my daughter's doing this or my son, stuff like that.
Good. And one of the things I want y'all to think about, right, is that in science, a lot of times, much like, again, like how you talked about leaders, Michael, we can put numbers on this stuff. That my mom, you was playing, with the season you was playing football, Michael, mama and daddy only came to 2 games. They came to 5 of my games. They, like, when they was at church, they talked about me for like 20 minutes. They only talked about you for like 3 minutes. With my allowance, when I was 16, my allowance was this much. Your allowance was this much, homie. Like, so we can put numbers to these things. And I make jokes of them, but in our relationships, right? Like, if we feel like we're not getting what we should out of a relationship, do we kind of maybe keep score a little bit?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Now, like, again, like Michael, we all been to college. So we all done had that friend who be down on their luck sometimes. Like, so when we go out to eat, I'll get you a few times, Michael. But if you ain't never getting me, I'm gonna be like, hey, that's like 6 times in a row, dog.
Exactly. You gotta say something.
Right. But if you're doing your part, I'm not even gonna notice how much it is, right? Like, so, like, for my boys, who are my boys now, like, we don't be keeping track of like who bought the tab or who paid for drinks last time, like, because it's just normal. But when it's disproportionate, you'll count these things.
Right.
So keep this in mind, right? All types of human behavior can be measured. We believe, Jakira, that we can measure Is this person more prejudiced than this person? Is this person more empathetic than this person? We can measure things like depression. We can measure things like love. So keep all these. Now, much like with health, right? That just because somebody has low blood pressure, does that necessarily mean that they're in good health? No, not always. So we want to look at these things in totality. So it's important to know that none of our measurements may be perfect, but we absolutely believe that we can measure human behavior. So keep this in mind as we go forward, all right? So we believe that we can measure happiness. So we know, for example, Ron, that even though America ranks very high in terms like income and stuff like that, compared to other countries, we rank very low in happiness. Do your own research, but this is what the data has shown. So we also want to look at, again, the theoretical perspectives within social psychology that all of you all have heard the concept. So what does a theory attempt to do again? I know y'all have heard me say this before. You probably have heard it elsewhere. Don't worry if it's not perfect today, but what do we do with a theory?
Basically, a theory, tests something in an attempt to explain, give reason to.
Good. So we're trying to explain why something happens. Yeah, simple. And explain it, Ron, using science and empirical facts. So not that can be objectively seen and proven. Not that are seen by me, but that you and I can look at together. So an example I was given in an earlier class, Michael, that my girl, she's actually like a native New Yorker, but she didn't get totally southern ass now and everything. So over the weekend, she's like, it's cold. And I'm like, cold? Because as a Chicagoan, that's a very different calculus for me. It was chilly, but like, nah, dog, like cold is like, so if she was like experiencing like Chicago cold, Michael, like she might have literally like passed out or something. But so we can objectively look at, what can we objectively look at though to determine how cold it is? We ain't got to use my calculus or hers.
The weather or the degrees, it tell you.
Right, just look at the temperature. Like, okay, look, it's all good that your hot body tail like I feel like it's real warm today, Michael, but for the rest of us, it really is 52 degrees. I don't know that that's the temperature, but I'm just saying. So we can look at this number. You may feel hot, Ron. You may feel cold, Maisha. But the temperature is a real actual thing, right? Keep this in mind because having empirical facts for our theories is really important. So we talked about this a little bit last time, but refresh me again. What's your understanding when you hear that concept, social psychology? What does that mean to you again? No wrong answers here. Ron, go ahead.
So my understanding of social psychology is, psychology is study of the human mind, and then social obviously is like a group of more than one individual. So basically, I kind of changed it now, but basically the study of the individual in a social context. That's kind of my understanding of it now.
Okay, good. And Jakira McLeod.
Picking it back up, social being in social settings and being able to communicate, and maybe that can be verbal or nonverbal or whatever. And then the psychology, of course, like thinking, feeling, how you're acting, how you behave in certain settings and in certain situations and stuff like that, how you're able to cope with it. And yeah, that's it.
Excellent. I love what you added there, Jakira, about the nonverbal. That is so important and something that's really overlooked. So much of our communication is nonverbal. And in social settings, our nonverbal communication communicates a lot. Y'all know, I'm not sure, y'all probably have not looked ahead that much, but do you know that there's a section in here that talks about flirting? And how there's a psychology to that. And how men and women do different things to flirt, and there's all type of nonverbal communication before you even meet anybody. Same type of thing again in professional settings. So even if you bored as hell, Michael, in a I'm good right now, but in a professional setting, you don't want to be looking like that. You could be bored as hell, but I want you to be wow. And meanwhile, you think, damn, I can't wait till this fucking meeting ends. I want this person to stop talking. Shit. You're like, wow, this is really engaging. Because your body language speaks stuff. And especially as Black people, right? We're very take it as, take us as we are type people. Like a lot of us, like, I don't be trying to show no poker face. Like, this is who I am, dog. But there are times where we want to be mindful about that, particularly when we're in mixed company. But this is one of the things about being at the HBCU and stuff, right? Where just something small like that, like, I don't see him as being disengaged. But in some mixed company, it may be perceived a different way. So we want to be very mindful of these things as we go forward, because that nonverbal communication is critically important. Jakir, did you have another question or comment? Sure. So very good definitions. So it speaks to, right, the scientific study of how individuals think, feel, and behave within a social context. The group aspect is important too. We'll talk about that in a moment. But how your individual psychology can be influenced, Michael, by the environment you're in. That makes sense, right?
Yes, sir.
We've been in spaces where just being there, like, it'll just mess with your spirit, so to speak. Like, just my vibes, I can't even be here, dog.
Right, I was about to say, it's almost like how I be saying, like, on Twitter and whatnot, like, how, like, you be so ready to, like, go out to a place, but then it's like, as soon as you get there, it's like, I don't even want to be here no more.
Absolutely. And conversely, like, people, there are things that can bring, like, people go to, like, religious services and things like that where they want to get into a certain vibe where you may feel beaten down or feel like your values are being compromised in the secular world. So you go to church, you go to the mosque because you want to that environment to affect you in a positive way. People go into, like, rehab and stuff. Like, it's one thing if you're an alcoholic and you're trying to deal with that individually, but if you're in an environment when you're around other people that actually know what you're talking, because, like, yeah, you come ask me, like, Ron, just stop drinking, dog. What's the problem? Fuck. It's a little bit more complicated than that, though, right? I don't understand that environment, but somebody else might. So the context in which, again, you're dealt with has a huge, huge value. And it's important as we mature that we understand that. The type of spaces, Jakira, that are going to optimize, your mental health. Like, we're seeing this right now, the social context, like the isolation that everybody is feeling, right? It's had a huge impact upon people's individual psychology. Jakira McLeod.
I had wrote it down. I had wrote it down because as soon as you just said that, and just looking at a little bit more, like, in the book, and I was wondering, like, why is it, like, who taught us as far as, like, not being able to socialize or, like, don't socialize and stuff like that? Because you have some people who are, social butterflies, and some people who are just extremely, like, to themselves and stuff. But then, like, as I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, well, maybe slavery may have had something to do with it. Like, people, like, having to just not talk. You can't talk unless you're told to and stuff like that. But I just wanted to add that point in because we said, like, with the isolation and things that we have going on now makes us feel like, oh, we're back into that mindset where, oh, I can't go out and speak to that person because I'm worried about catching COVID type.
Right. No, excellent points all the way around. Like, I think the slavery one, in terms of, like, there are some different levels, and I believe this is changing, but, like, I mean, for generations, like, Black people were trained, you ain't supposed to look white people in the eye, you're not supposed to talk a certain way, like, that you're supposed to be crossing the street and all that type of stuff. So in many ways, we were socialized to be very differential. In many ways, like me and my mother will go back and forth because she, like, of course, Ron and Michael, I'm sure that you all have, and probably all of y'all have, where you get the police talk from your parents at a very young age, and how you're supposed to, like, talk and interact with the police. And my mother be telling me, like, to be telling the police, yes, sir. And I'm like, look, I'm be respectful, I'm be cool. I ain't finna be giving these dudes no yes, sir. I'm just to let you know, like, I ain't finna be ignorant or nothing like that, but I'm not ignorant or disrespectful to nobody. But I ain't finna be, yes, sir. Like, no, I can't be doing all that. But it speaks to that, yes, there is like, that context is something that is understood that all Black people, or most Black people, are probably going to be exposed to. and it impacts our psychology in many important ways. I think we see this even more so with women in terms of how they've been socialized traditionally, in terms of if you speak up too much, you may be perceived a certain way. So yeah, all these things play an important role, and I want you to keep these examples in mind as we go through the text. So very quickly, right, when we go through this definition, Michael, look at again, it needs to be closely linked to scientific study, meaning that we're going to make a lot of conclusions over the next few weeks, Maisha, as it relates to this course. But they don't come just from nowhere. So when we make these conclusions about these are how people become prejudiced, this is how people become more generous, it's going to be done from research. It's not just something that's come from like, haphazardly. These things have been studied very close. Like when I asked y'all last time about like how your birth order affects behavior, like it's been a lot of research done on that. We're gonna look at how you reacted when your parents were, or better yet, how you felt your parents responded to your needs as an infant has huge impacts upon your behaviors throughout lives. We're going to talk about that. And again, it ain't just like, pretend, like it's been researched. So in terms of, very briefly, we're going to talk about this in great detail. I think you all will find this very interesting, where if you were the type of baby, Michael, where every time you cried, your parents were picking you up all the time, or you were the type where, okay, they kind of like let you cry it out, like, look, you got to figure that stuff out. Like, we ain't never finna pick you up. And some might be a little bit in between. There's a large correlation research, Jakira, that shows that a lot of your adult behavior can be tied just to that. The babies that are left to cry by themselves, what do you think they're learning very early?
Well, the ones that's probably left to cry, they're probably learning that they're probably gonna have to do a lot of stuff on their own and overcome a lot of emotions on their own. They ain't gonna have nobody there to help them, anything like that.
Excellent. One extra credit point, Michael. That's spectacular, sir. And they learn, and Michael, like, think about it, dog. 3 months, 6 months old. They're like, you know what? I'm gonna have to work this stuff out for myself in life. So it's time, and let me be clear, there are always exceptions to this rule, but it makes it where sometimes it'd be difficult for people to get too close to them. They don't be trusting people. They're very independent, even when people try and help, like, no, I got it. But it's like, no, you need some help, my kid. Like, no, I don't need no help, dog. I got this. So understanding that about yourself, because everybody needs some help at some point. So if you can understand it about yourself, and then like how Jakir was saying, like I think somebody was saying earlier, like about how men behave, that it'd be tenfold with us. No, I'm gonna take on the world and do everything by myself. So these things are happening 3 months old, and I use this because, again, this is a phenomenon that's been studied many times over across many cultures. And as we've learned more about this, Ron, a lot of parents have been more cognizant about how they interact with their children, not even just as infants, but even before they, like, when they're in the womb and stuff. Like, development is going on, like, constantly. It's really important to understand, because all of y'all probably want to be parents at some point, right? So if nothing else, I think that you'll get a lot from this class. But again, we're going to be dealing with research and facts, not just opinion and innuendo. We're going to look at how individuals think, feel, and behave. And then we want to look at the social context. So again, the same individual, Jakira, like the same person that you are, if we put you in a different environment, it can have different impacts upon your psychology. That's why, like, again, like in thinking about your approach to parenting, you want to be very, very cognizant about the type of environment you want to create for your children. Because a lot of times that'd be the whole difference. It's all types of cats that I know, man, that was way smarter than me, more ambitious. I was very blessed in my environment. Maisha Hainsworth.
I just want to say, like, an example would that be like, okay.
Well, you froze up a little bit.
Say if you have an individual who grew up, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so say if you have like an individual who grew up in the hood, but then they made it out, and when they go to like a different region, like maybe the suburbs, they acting different now because their level of thinking is different.
Great point. Great point. But you know what happens a lot of times though? They may be in a different environment, but a lot of times, like, it's still like who they are is going to stay with them. Now it's like, let me be clear, right? Ideally, as mature, normally socialized human beings, like we should be constantly growing. But a lot of who we are gets set in very early. So, like in many ways, where I was thinking about, I was actually kind of thinking about this other day, where I have drifted away. Like I live and exist in a different class position than I grew up in, but I still kind of see myself as that dude. Like I don't see myself in many ways as the person that I am now. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like I don't like, so I don't behave in all those same ways that I would have, like, back in the day by any means, but and I'm very conscious, like I don't want to lose who I was. So I'm very conscious of that. Like I don't want to, like, yeah, because I feel like sometimes people will feel like, okay, I'm better than these people. I like, no, I don't know. That shit is whack. But you're right that being in a different environment, I think a lot of parents who do that are very cognizant about making sure that their children are exposed to different things. I don't watch very much reality TV, Ron, but I know, like, where you see somebody like, a T.I. or somebody like that, where they grew up, like, having to make certain choices because of their environment, but their kids, they got them as far away from that as possible, correct? In many ways, because they know the role of the environment. They know how very lucky they were, Maisha, to make it out. But you're right that that coming into a different environment obviously is going to play a different role in terms of your behavior, norms, and all types of things. So I just want you all to be cognizant and conscious of how the environment is affecting you. Otherwise, you could be affected in ways that may be detrimental to you. Because if people is telling you, like, okay, well, Ron, I mean, you're rich now. Why are you still talking like, why, Ron? Why are you wearing your hair like that? I mean, you have so much money now. Like, nah, now if you want to change your hair, Ron, that's cool, but it should be because you want to, not because I have to fit into this new context and culture. But moving on, I apologize. I didn't mean to get too deep into the weeds with that. As I talked about Jakira, right? Everything that we're going to discuss here is informed by some type of scientific study. This is derived from a scientific method. How do we go about answering these questions? How do we go about learning about the scientific world? So this involves several different things. Systematic observation. Keep in mind what I talked about before, right? How, like, how your parents interact with you within your first months of being born can impact you as an adult. We know that because we have observed, and let me be clear here, Jakira, not just observation, systematic observation. What do you think I mean? Why do you think I had to make that clarification? What's the difference? And don't worry about if your answer is perfect right now, but what do you think is the difference between observation and systematic observation? What do you think is the difference?
So again, at first glance, it's kind of like, I didn't peep it because I wrote down systematic observation when I was doing my notes, but I didn't peep that it changed what it was. But my first thought is, systematic is, something that's put together to work or meant to carry something out in its fullest. So as far as a systematic observation, possibly an observation of a system that's meant to serve a purpose.
Okay, good. Yeah,
okay.
Yes, good.
I got you.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
No, that was it. I was just saying, yeah, that's my first thought off the top of my head.
Okay. Jakira?
Definitely breaking it down in a way that Ron did. I know, like, in order for specific things to happen, you have a system, like you have a system orderly day. So instead of like regular observations, like I noticed that you're moving, or I noticed that you're drinking Red Bull and stuff like that, the systematic observation will probably be things that, actually like requires more attention, like on a day, like maybe a time, I'm looking at you on this time to see how you're moving throughout your morning, like what steps do you take to get out of bed, or to get to work, things of that nature. So maybe like a specific, more so observation rather than just jotting down what you see at whatever timing or whenever.
Really, a lot of good stuff there, Jakira. I'm gonna come right back to that. Very good examples. Maisha Haynesworth.
I was just gonna say pretty much some of the same things Jojo said was paying a closer attention, not just looking at something, but actually playing fine detail and like, okay, at 6 o'clock, you get up and you do this. At 6:30, you're back doing this. Not
Excellent.
just, oh, you go to the store a day, something like
Excellent. 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 All right. So listen up, right? So I had mentioned in the previous class that I got a physical over the summer, Michael, and the doctor said that my creatine levels were a little bit high. Nothing too crazy, but we might want to monitor this. I didn't know what that meant. So you know what I did, Ron? I did my own research, and I looked up what creatine, what this meant, and it showed Jakira that I was a little bit more dehydrated than I needed to be. So again, right, in science, we try and look at cause and effect. So I didn't think that I'm like, man, I drink a lot of water, so this seems kind of strange. So I wonder, like, man, what could it be? What do y'all think it might have been that could have been causing this extra dehydration?
Energy drinks.
Excellent, Ron. So in my previous class, before I could even finish the story, Janaya Barnes was like, that's some autumn energy drinks, Muhammad. And that was immediately my conclusion. And I was like, what? Again, right? And keep this in mind, I'm talking about the scientific method here, Ron. We use scientific thinking all the time, all of us as human beings. So I'm thinking, because who knows best what's been in my body? Is the doctor going to know? No, I'm going to know. So I'm like, okay, man, why could I be, I was like, oh man, yeah, I've been drinking a gang of energy drinks. That probably is what it is. So over time, like I was like, I got another checkup in December. My levels were a lot lower as I've decreased mine. I know I'm not a good example here today, Michael, but I didn't get much sleep last night. Forgive me. But listen, as it relates to observation, right? I use that example, Ron, as it goes to this first bullet point of observation. It's different. So why did Janaya immediately think it was probably energy drinks? She's had me for several classes, and anybody's had me for several classes, y'all probably seen me drinking these boys, right? Y'all came into the office back before COVID, and y'all saw them all everywhere. So she's observed that, right? But systematic observation is more like what Maisha and Jakira was saying, as opposed to just saying he drinks a lot of energy drinks. We could do it very differently, right? No, I observed Dr. Muhammad between 12 and 4 p.m. for 20 days in January, and I saw him drink 78 energy drinks. That would be very catastrophic if I was drinking that much, but you know what I'm saying. But you see the difference, Michael? This is important, right? Between because again, people do this all the time. Well, hey, I saw a white person that got killed by the police on YouTube. Yeah, you did see that. That's very different from, hey, 25 Black people were killed in the state of Florida compared to 3 white people in the calendar year 2020. Again, I'm just throwing a number out. So systematic observation. That's what we do with science, Michael. Everybody observes all the time. So the same way that for my criminal justice majors, it's very different than if you're doing a stakeout and you're just observing something, right? When you're doing a stakeout, you're trying to set yourself up, Jakira, to look for something very specific. And the example I gave is different where you ain't really you see me casually drinking these Red Bulls, but obviously you paying attention to 25 other things. You ain't really thinking about what I'm doing. But if your goal is, hey, I'm going to observe and count exactly how many Red Bulls he drinks. I'm going to observe it and count how many boys go into what I believe is his trap house. That's a very different conversation, right? Then description and measurement. So measurement, I gave y'all that one, right? It's different from saying, okay, he drunk a lot of Red Bull, as opposed to he drunk 37 Red Bull this semester. And then you might even have to give some more numbers, Ron. The average American drinks just 10 energy drinks a month. This dude, Muhammad, is tripping. So do y'all see what I'm saying here? Keep this in mind because I hope y'all know at some point you're going to have to be putting on your scientific hat soon. And I want you to be thinking about something that you might want to observe as it relates to social psychology and how you would measure it. But when we talk about measurement, Michael, a lot of that's dealing with numbers. Don't just say he drank a lot. Did he drink 10? Did he drink 20? Did he drink 30? You know, it's not enough for me to say if I'm making an academic argument, Jakira, that Black people are killed more by police than whites. It's not enough for me just to say more. I have to give you some precise numbers, okay? Keep these things in mind as we go forward. So we also talked about, again, we want to look at how individuals think, feel, and behave. That one of the key things that we study in social psychology, Ron, how do people think? How do people think about interracial relationships? How do people think about homosexuality? How do people think about marijuana? How do people think about defunding the police? How do people think about the right to bear arms? How do people behave when around opposite races? Because that could be different than how people think, right? In social science, we try and study all of this. So I was talking in a previous class about so one of the things, so there are 3 goals in science. You ain't got to write this down, but we try and explain why something happens, Shakira. Why are Black people getting COVID at higher rates than other populations? We can try and predict why something happens. How bad will the California wildfires be in the next 5 years if we don't begin to make some environmental changes? I'm sure y'all saw some of that over the summer, and we can predict, you know, what may happen if we don't make some changes. What will happen if I continue to drink, you know, Red Bulls at a high rate and my creatine level and other things like that affected? So by me getting that information right, I could begin to make some changes. So the same way, if you go to the doctor and you learn that you're pre-diabetic, you can make some changes in your behavior, right? So we try and use science to try and uncover all these things. But it's important to know that our thoughts, our feelings, and our behavior are not always aligned. There are many times, Michael, where you may go to the doctor and you think, man, I saw this. I saw what the doctor said here. I think I got to change my behavior. Do people always do that? No, that's hard. So one of the things that we try and do to try and explain human behavior, we try and look at all of these very closely. This goes into different categories. The first thing, like I'm going to start from the bottom and then I'll get here. The first thing that we look at, well, as a scientist, and really just as a man, the first thing that I try and look at in terms of finding out who people are is their behavior. Like, it's one thing, right? Like, so, because again, like when we talk about police brutality and stuff like this, a lot of people that want to defend like some of their actions were like, well, no, I know these officers, they're good people, they have good hearts. Maybe that's true. I can't really look at what's in their heart though. What I can see is their behavior. And when I can see like, you know, the behavior when there's like Black Lives Matter protests and police like going into the Capitol, like I saw that. Like I saw what happened to George Floyd and the threat that he presented. And I saw like all these white people going into the Capitol. Like, I mean, it happened. So you can tell me that these are good, decent people. They may be. That's what they did. We can record that, right? We can measure what they actually did. Maybe again now, people may have been motivated by different things in being there. That's where we go into their private beliefs and attitudes. That we may not know. Again, like, so, because it's dangerous, right? Like, am I going to make the claim, Jakira, that every police officer, like, you know, or police like hate Black people? I don't know what's in their heart or their head, and I don't really care about that. What I care about is what's actually happening. So what we try and study, right, are all these components. So we'll talk about how we get at this, right? So one of the things, right, like, what are some of the different methods of social research that y'all are familiar with? We talked about what we want to learn with social research. What are some of the different methods that y'all are familiar with? Don't worry if you don't know them all. Go ahead, Jakira. I thought so.
Like gathering like data purposes and stuff, like so and also like coming up with a theory, coming up with, you know, what you're testing and
Now, how do we now?
observation, all that stuff.
Now, what are some ways that we use? What are some things that we do to gather that data? The data
Research on the web, doing like the actual, you know, great research, not like just Wikipedia type stuff, but like really going through data and going through other people's research who did the same thing that's similar to yours.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Ron, what are some of these specific things called? Y'all know
them. So I used a survey for the first time, like not too long ago, and it's like, yo, you know, what's the? I'm tying this into my other class again. You know, you organize the data, you summarize the data, and then you interpret it. So that's, you know, what the summary is as far as data.
Good. So one is survey research. What's some other things we do to gather data? Good.
To gather data, you can do field research. Like actually go, if like you're studying about something, well, of course in physical science, but
excellent.
Ultimately, just go in.
I didn't hear the last one, Maisha. I'm sorry.
Put your boots on the ground. Boots on the ground.
I didn't hear the last part. So we got survey research, we got field experiments, we got lab. You can do a laboratory experiment, and then what Jakira was describing was secondary data analysis. Secondary data analysis, where other people have written on like all types of topics, and you may get some information that influences and informs your research. Go ahead, Ron. I'm sorry.
Something just popped in my mind. Anthropology, isn't that like when you immerse yourself in a culture or area and you kind of live that way to see it yourself? Isn't that, would that be primary?
That would, yes, that would be participant observation. Participant observation. Very good. We're gonna come and we're gonna talk about all of those in great detail. I'm very impressed that y'all are so versed on this so far. And again, I would this is something that you definitely want to write down because we're gonna revisit. This is not important now, but I use these examples because this is how we get at these different concepts here, Jakira. That we use survey research to find out people's private beliefs about things. So for example, right, I talked about predicting stuff where, don't judge me about this, Michael, but I may have gotten like, stopped by the police when I was in my early 20s for having possession of marijuana. And he was giving me a lecture about and wanted me to feel bad about it. I told him I didn't feel bad about it. And I told him that in very short time, it was going to be legal. He's like, what? Like, man, you're crazy. If this stuff is ever legal, then I'm going to stop being a police officer. I'm like, well, you need to probably retire now because it's going to be legal pretty soon. And I was right. It's amazing to see, like, so and I know y'all, it's not legal down here for y'all, but in Illinois, where I'm from, it is fully, and it's amazing to see. Like, I mean, it's crazy. But yes, it is fully legal in Illinois, and people took advantage of that very quickly. Now, was I saying this because I was so smart? No. I had some familiarity with some of the data. So for one, I knew what the survey research said, Ron, and I knew what Americans' private beliefs were about marijuana for the most part. Now, not older people, but most people my age and younger were not as freaked out as older people were about this stuff. So it's like, look, most people don't feel like that no more, man, where it's like this gateway drug where if you're going to smoke weed, you're going to start smoking crack and heroin. No, that shit's not going to be happening, man. Like, I don't know what y'all was on. We knew all types of people that, like, now let me be clear. Most of the students I come in contact with should stop smoking weed immediately. But I know all types of people that function in being able to smoke the same way, believe it or not. In the 1980s, it was all types of functional crackheads and people on cocaine and people on all types of prescription drugs now. So in this way, like just in seeing how people behave in their private lives, the data suggested as people got older, well, as the older people stopped making the decisions, that the laws were probably going to change. Emotions, like I said, people were not even like people I knew who like did not like to smoke themselves. They didn't like, have that big of a hang up about it, like in a way that many people have. And then I had observed enough public behaviors. Like not just amongst young Black people, or like all types of walks of life, dog. People that you would not imagine was getting high, Maisha. Like I have seen, like, wow, this is amazing. Like, wow, but you're a doctor, but you're an architect, like you're a senator, like what the hell? So over time, like we could see through all this how the laws were going to change, do all these different things. So in this way, right, it's really important to like, get it data that can predict these kind of things. So in this way, eventually it's gonna come to South Carolina and all these places, but in the Bible Belt, it's gonna be a little bit slower. But whatever this is, like whatever the case, again, we can use scientific research to make these conclusions. And we can use it by survey research. We can use participant observation. We can use secondary data analysis, among others. We also talked about the social context, Ron. And much like it's natural for a dog to bark. Let me take it back. It's natural for it to snow when it gets below 32 degrees and there's precipitation. It is natural for a hurricane to only be able to exist in certain environments. So like a hurricane is probably not going to be able to hit Atlanta because the natural conditions won't be in place. Like it usually cannot get into big cities. I'm sure, of course, there are exceptions. So we also believe that there's a social nature to human beings. So even though like, let me see, Ron, you might be the most nice, pleasant person ever. But we all understand that there's you can only push Ron so far before he's probably gonna try and beat your ass, right? Everybody has that, every human being has that limit, correct? We understand that, right? It's believed that that's a nature of man. So it's natural, for example, for you to defend yourself. Like you are designed to do that, even if you're trained to be a pacifist. So like, we just honor Martin Luther King and stuff like that. It would be certain limits to that stuff, man, where Dr. King like, all right, motherfucker, you hit me one more goddamn time, I'm gonna beat one of you motherfuckers' ass. No, that's probably not one of his recorded speeches. But I joke in saying that, we all have a valve and we all have certain limits that we must face. And most human beings, we try and study these things. So for example, right, when we talk about the role that the environment plays, that it's natural for certain behaviors to be produced by certain environments. So if you have like, a bunch of desperation, a bunch of poverty, what we saw happen like in inner city, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago during the crack 80s, that ain't just particular to like that. That's anywhere in the world under any circumstances. If people are really desperate and poor and they don't have many other things to help them escape their poverty, they're gonna use what they have. That's social nature. Many times people will believe, Ron, that that's something that Black people are just inherently criminal. That's not the case. That's something that's like, okay, it's biological. No, your social environment is going to produce certain things. Do y'all understand me? This is one of the reasons why, Maisha, like we really value and stress education, because the context of being an educated person, and we don't have to be educated in the same things and all that. And education does not just mean going to school. Let me be clear on that again. Being educated is not equated with going to school. Y'all understand that, correct? But being an educated person can influence your individual behavior in the context in which you exist in many important ways. We'll come back to that too later on. Let's look a little bit more closely at how we perceive ourselves and as we go through this, right, one of the things I want you to make note of here, Maisha, here what you see in parentheses are the chapters where these questions are going to be covered in more detail. So we're giving you a preview here now But later on in the text, we're going to explore these more deeply. I'll let you get all these down. And you don't like these are coming directly from your book if you want to reference it there. But if you want to, I'll give you a couple of minutes to write this down, and then I'll unpack it a little bit more. Are there any questions or comments before I do so? Well, go
Are
ahead
you
and get
gonna
that
post
down.
this?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you gonna post this PowerPoint on my island?
I don't know what you
Is
said.
it
I think you asked, is this?
She said, "Are you gonna post it on my island?"
I'm gonna try very hard to, yes. The lecture is being recorded. So I've tried to upload it. It was not allowing me over the weekend, but I'm gonna reach out to IT. As you recall, Maisha, and being in sociology, I didn't have any problems last semester, so I don't know what's going on, but I'll get it fixed. So yes, my plan is to have this lecture and all lectures posted. See, for sure. So in social psychology, Michael, you want to be looking at how you perceive yourself and how you look at other people. I talked about last time, Jakira, that stepping outside of yourself and taking an honest look at yourself is a very difficult thing for human beings to do. Ron Anderson.
You said, you mentioned, you know, taking a look at yourself and then taking a look at yourself basically from the outside. Isn't that, we did that. That's a sociological perspective, no? You know, seeing yourself compared to society within it and apart from it.
Now, they're related, but this aspect is not necessarily related to, so you don't have to do this process as part of society.
Okay.
This is more of a micro level thing, whereas
Okay.
the sociological perspective is, yes, looking at like, you know, what does it mean to be a young black man in modern America? This is more like, okay, is my self-hatred related to me being black? Or do I feel like I can't do this because I still got some of this slave mentality hanging on? Am I quicker to be you know, more aggressive towards other black people because of XYZ? So those kind of things.
Okay, so basically more on social psychology is more kind of on that micro level focus versus sociology on the macro.
Absolutely.
So where would the meso fall? Would the meso still be sociology? Because
Yes,
that still
definitely.
is kind of a group.
Definitely. Because, and I was going to say, in some ways, I hate even making like that binary, because it's not like they're separate, because the individual is still part of society, but there are times where you have to look at yourself distinct from that as well. Because even in this class, we're still going to come back to the group and the society as well.
Okay.
But for right now, for this particular question, when we're talking about social perception, we're talking about strictly how you perceive yourself. So for example, Ryan, and I ain't gonna put you on blast, how you sometimes perceive yourself as not being as an effective writer as I perceive you to be. That ain't got nothing to do with society. Well, it has little to do with society, but it may be related to, like, you know, some of your own internal psychology.
Yeah.
And looking at why would you perceive yourself that way. And I share with y'all where y'all might be really dope and y'all be beating yourselves up all the time. Or you might be really whack and you giving yourself all types of props and credits you don't deserve. But let's unpack these a little bit more, Ron, and perhaps it's become more clear. So, for example, right, and this kind of like dives right into what we're talking about, where y'all may have seen some people like this, and maybe have been like this yourselves, where you'll be having a really good opportunity and you almost kind of sabotage it for yourself. Sometimes it could be an opportunity. Sometimes it could be a relationship where maybe you got a friend, Maisha, where she be having really good dudes and be beginning to relationship and to be everything she wants, and she mess up her relationships again and again and again. I've met people like that. Yeah, I've been like that sometimes. Like my kid, like, so like we talked about this before, right? Where if if you're afraid of being hurt, like I know when I've been in this, like if there have been times where I have been afraid of being emotionally hurt in a relationship, Maisha, I might fuck up the relationship before I can get hurt. She ain't gonna get me. And so in that way, Ron, like you got to take a look back something like, God, like, man, she was a good girl, man. Like, what was she doing? Michael.
Like that made me think like when people say like a person like they go through like a bunch of relationships or whatever, and then people like, well, before you start looking at the other person, you need to look at yourself in the mirror, like what you
Absolutely.
did,
Yes.
what you got going on.
Yes. Because, you know, every time one of our boys or one of your girls is telling you about they, in a relationship, it was always that person fought in everything they did. You know, but at some point, it's like, you know, and again, sometimes that may be the case, but, you know, again, as a mature person, you also want to like at least take a step back, like, okay, well, could I have done things X, Y, Z? And ideally, you have a dialogue with the person before y'all get to that point. But, you know, sometimes that can be challenging. But whether it be relationships or whether it be like, again, like, you know, just an opportunity that there are sometimes human beings that deal with the psychology, Ron, of just getting it in their own way all the time. And a lot of times it takes help from other people to kind of interrupt that process. Again, like I talked about before with drug and alcohol rehab, like people will have really good intentions, but it's really hard to do that by yourself. We also going to ask like things like, Ron, how do people in East Asia differ from North Americans in a way that they explain people's behavior? So let me see if I can, that when we like, so let me ask it this way. Have you ever met anybody that you had a bad first impression about that you end up liking later on?
Almost every school year.
What changed? What influenced that change? What made you like them later, Michael, or anybody?
Well, for me, it's like, because just based off the first impression, you might think like, this person, they seem like they might be conceited or whatever your first impression might be. But then like you might like see them out with somebody, or you might just actually just hang out with them, and then you see like the person that they actually are. You're like, man, the person ain't even that bad.
Good. Other thoughts? Good.
Conversation, like just seeing that they actually could hold a conversation, they actually have something worth talking about and stuff. Like they're not like what they, you know, appear to be.
Good. Ron Anderson.
So I'm guilty of like, you know, I shouldn't, but if I got a friend, right, and they're telling me about this person and they're kind of like, yo, this person ain't shit, this, that, and the next, I'm like, oh, word, like, I'm stay away from them. But then, you know, I come across, you know, I actually interact with them. It's like, you sure they ain't shit? Or like, is that your perspective? Or like, because there's been plenty of times I almost made enemies with cool ass people, and that's not good. I shouldn't do that, but
absolutely. And it's a great examples on each front. And we got to be mindful about those kind of things. And it's difficult. But what we have seen about North Americans a lot of times, Ron, is that not only do we perceive who people are very often through first impressions, we get a sense of who they are off of very limited information. So for example, right, if you come in, if I meet your mother for the very first time while she's preparing Thanksgiving dinner, how might that interaction be?
Well, depending on how busy, what time looking like, because again, you know, I feel like my mom's in the kitchen, she cooking, you know, she don't want to be fucking bothered. You either in here helping or you're not. So it might come off kind of quick as in, hey, how you doing? Sit at the table. I'll be there in a second. Rather than, you know, hey, how you doing? I'm so-and-so. Yeah, kind of a sort of conversation.
Excellent. So Ron did an excellent job of giving the full context of her behavior. But a lot of times what people do, Jakira, is, oh, she was rude and she's short to me, so Ron mother says is rude. And it's like, no, like, look at again, I talked about in the beginning, right? The context of behavior, the context. You got to look at when you meet her, dog. Like, you don't see, like, how would you feel if you up here cooking and you got all these people, hungry people waiting for you, man. You trying to do 25 things. Kareem, you've been in a situation where you've been busy before. You don't have as much time to be as congenial. Hey, how you doing? I might do that later on. And I probably, hey, my bad, Jakir. I'm sorry, I was a little bit rude earlier. I was trying to do X, Y, Z. But a lot of times we don't give each other that chance. Oh, she was rude. And we just, boom, that's who Ron's mama is forever. I done seen her 20 years later, that's who she is. And maybe that is who she is. But let me see her in many different contexts. So oftentimes in America, what we do, we see somebody in one context and we just size them up, as opposed to, like, because again, right, all of us, like, we're human beings. We got all types of different mood swings, right? So you can't, like, I'm not gonna judge Jakira off of like her worst mood. Like, I gotta judge her off of the person that she's been over 4 years. Like, and like in those 4 years, like, yeah, between me and her, like, I done seen like probably just about everything. But I also can see her stable personality. But oftentimes in our culture, we don't give that full context. So please be mindful about that in your own relationships, because a lot of times, again, like, whether it be like, you can mess up again, like, so like you said, miss out on meeting some really cool people. You can miss out on missing some professional networks, other opportunities, like people that you can really click and rock and roll with off of something that may be very limited. And you may not like this person because, and it could be, hell, I'm telling you context, it could be stuff where, oh, well, she an AKA, I don't like her. Well, I live in Bed-Stuy, he live in Crown Heights, so I don't like him. I don't really mess with them cats on the west side, dog. Well, hey, fuck them vice lords. Like, so it'd be like stuff like that. Like, so we got to be very mindful of those things, and really try and look at people in full. But a lot of times we perceive other people off of very limited information. So be mindful about that and be careful about that. Stereotypes is very connected to this. Stereotypes related to this, where you will see a Black person, see an Hispanic person behaving a certain way in a certain context, and you assume that that's how all Black people behave. So you want to be very careful about those things. Now, social influence is another section, Ron, that we're going to look at that explores how we influence each other. And sometimes, like, it can be like, when we look at being influenced, it don't necessarily mean that you're a follower, because there are some influences that you should want to have, right? That if I want to be rich, hell, I absolutely want to be influenced by people that have developed good habits to build and maintain wealth. But we want to be very mindful about the kind of things, the kind of influences that we take, because otherwise we might be influenced by things that may not be in our best interest. So we talk about, for example, right, why do we often like what we suffer for? What this explains, again, a psychology, Ron, that human beings, almost all of us, we do and say and engage in all types of things that may not always be beneficial for us. Again, I've gotten better, Michael, where we'll be having these checklists of things that you want in a woman, ladies, things that y'all want in a man, and y'all might meet somebody that got all this stuff. I'm like, fuck that. I'm finna go get with this girl over here who only got a part of this stuff, because she fine. And then we be wondering later on, like, and it'd be people that we know are no good for us, and it's like, what are you doing? Again, whether it be women, whether it be Red Bull, I know that they ain't healthy. I know I need to chill. I'm going to do better, I promise. But as human beings, so for people with addictions, I make light of it in small ways, but they know that these things are harmful to them. Like, it's hard to overcome an addiction. Alcohol, drugs, food is incredibly addictive. That's the worst one, actually. Like, that food is really tough. People want to lose weight, man, and like get themselves disciplined. It's tough. But being able to understand that, and again, like, if you know that about yourself, you can inform the things that influence you, Rob. If you know that there are bad habits and stuff that you may have, or habits you want to change, like, so if I know that I want to work out more, I probably need to be more around people that are going to be pushing me to do that. Again, influence. This is a chapter 7 is going to be really key, right? Where we're going to look at how salespeople try and trick us into buying things we never really wanted. So when one of the areas that psychologists most go into, Jakir, like to work for businesses to like trick people into like getting out of their money. Like people be thinking it like those things have like people just be doing what they want. Like, oh my God, the psychology of consumerism is amazing. Jakir, you had a comment or a question?
Yes, it's like a show on Netflix. Well, more so like a series and stuff. I done forgot what it was, but they have people who work like mainly with like social media and stuff. And
About the social
pretty
dilemma?
much like, yes, it was so
Yeah,
good. So
it
like,
is.
I mean, as you said, like, you know, like people working in those businesses and stuff, they make good money because they know how to like deal with people mindsets. They know like what the people want, and it's like easy for them to, you know, get off on them. So yeah,
Yes.
that it's crazy because it makes good money, but it's so sad because you're really controlling somebody, but
Right.
it makes great money. But
yes. Yeah, if you have access to Netflix, The Social Dilemma is highly recommended. Quite frankly, especially for y'all age group, because there'd be a lot of things going. And look, like, I'm not going to suggest, you know, I think it's almost impossible to tell people, you know, of any age for the most part, not to be using social media and stuff like that. The same way it's impossible, Jakir, to tell people not to shop. But you just want to be mindful about these things. So like, whether you're talking about social media or whether you're talking about when you go into a grocery store, Ron, everything in there is set up in position in a very certain way to try and influence your choices. They put certain things, Michael, if you have children, things are placed in places where children can reach it for the purpose of them harassing, hey, daddy, can I get this? They know you ain't gonna get everything. You're gonna get some of it, and they are calculating that. Ron, you had a comment or a question?
That's exactly what I was about to say. Because, you know, you ever peep when Black Friday time come around or holiday time come around, there's always TVs in the front of the store and in the back of the store.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you pass by the TVs, you know, I came here for food, you know, I'm gonna pass by the TVs. I don't need to see them. Either A, I'm gonna see them again when I walk out and think about it, or on my way to the back of the store, I'm gonna see them for the second time.
Right.
And then maybe the third time we're walking out, it's like, yo, these TVs are cheap.
Right.
So,
in fact, I saw something, it may be conspiracy theory, like, but because I don't have the science behind it yet. So I try and be mindful about the things I say, and I got you one second, Michael. But like when those them last 600 stimulus checks came out, not only did they have those TVs positioned, it's like 549, 559, and stuff like that. Like, you know, so yeah, those things are very aligned. So you want to be very mindful of those kind of things. Michael, thanks for your patience, sir.
What you had said about like how the stores they position stuff low with some kids grab, it reminded me how I had seen this. It might have been like a month or two ago, like how stores like grocery stores like Walmart, how like always in every register they always got like the snacks and the candies to like right at the register. So it's almost like last minute you like, oh, I can go ahead and get this too while I'm up here.
Right.
You know, like quick, like this little small quick stuff like that.
Right. And how many times have they gotten us like that? I know they be getting me.
I'm telling you.
Oh yeah, I will get this. And it is somebody's job, Michael. Like, again, we talked about measurement. So they had probably, like, somebody has presented to them like, hey, you can make $200 million a year just off of this. Like, probably some crazy number like that, like real talk. Like, so keep these things in mind, right? Because again, as consumers, but eventually my hope is that you all are going to be business owners and sell things to people, hopefully sell them things that they actually need. But whatever the case, like, you want to be very mindful that all the time people are trying to influence your thinking. That's why when I say do your own research, it ain't just a cliche. It is really important. Because, like, you know, real talk, like, particularly for Black people, because too often they count on us consuming things without thinking. That's a stereotype that they have of us, that we just buy and trick off our money any old way. And a lot of us have lived up to that stereotype. We got to be better than that. Ron Anderson.
I just thought about it, like, you know, damn, where they usually keep the energy drinks at?
Right.
Right there in the front with a counter at. So
Absolutely.
like, oh shit, you know, I might as well grab one while I'm up here. Yeah.
I'm tired. I'm sleepy. Like, you know, you're tired. Oh, come on, right? Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was gonna say something. But I'm gonna leave that one alone. So yeah, so you want to be very, very mindful of those things. The same way, right? You also, right, when we talk about influence, some influence can be negative, but there also can be positive influence. So there are some chores, some tasks, right, in life that it is easier to perform in a group than it's easier to do by ourselves. When I was talking about earlier, right, in terms of like the person perception and like you're shutting people off, you're closing yourself off to people, that can be kind of, again, particularly for us, like for Black folks, we get this crab in a barrel mentality and stereotype, and there's been some merit to that, but we could not have survived in this country if we did not work together as much as we have. We got to do a lot better. We got to do much better. But we need to understand that, I mean, it's so much easier for things to be done in a group. So whether it be in an organization, whether it be studying, forming a study group, whether it be, yes, I know you're a strong, independent Black woman, Maisha, and you can conquer the world by yourself, but I would love for you to have some help and assistance. But it got to be some real help and assistance. It can't just be no, like, just a dead body taking up weight. We ain't got time for none of that. So a couple more things. I'm going to rush through this last part. And this, again, is just giving us previews to some of the things that we're going to talk about. But and doubling back very quickly, Maisha, we're trying to define what social psychology is. We want to discuss, again, like one of the main things we want to look at is how human behavior can be measured. We're going to look at subsequent chapters and some of the theories. But the main things we're unpacking here, right, is how our understanding of social psychology is related to scientific study, meaning that it's been researched thoroughly, that we're looking at how the three components of individuals, that we are made up of three components, Shakira: our thoughts, our emotions, and our behavior. Our thoughts, our feelings or emotions, and our behavior. That they don't always go along. So in this way, I talked about prejudice, right? That just because somebody smiles in your a person from another race smiles at you, does that necessarily mean that they're not prejudiced? No. So we want to look at all these things very closely. We do this through the scientific method. That scientific method involves observation, either through survey, research, experiments, field experiments, participant observation, etc. In these surveys, in this field research, Maisha, we describe what we observe, and we try and put some measurement to it. So in your survey, Ron, you were measuring something. What were you trying to find out in your survey, if you don't mind me asking?
What was it? It wasn't nothing major. It was like, what was it? It was something as simple as like, do you prefer to hold your phone with like one hand or two hands? It was something real simple.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good. Yeah. So you can measure, like 70% of people like to hold their phones with one hand. Just throwing a number out there. So you can give a precise number to it. We want to look at, again, is concern itself with our private, again, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. So I can see how you behave. Again, I can see how races behave. We'll never know how many racist people they are, because we won't be able to know everybody's private thoughts. There may be some people that may not like Black people, but it may not affect them that much emotionally. And within this, in trying to learn about human behavior within various contexts, we're going to go through the steps of social perception in terms of how we perceive ourselves and others. We're going to look at how we influence people and how we influence other people. We're going to look at our social interactions. So in terms of, we talked about like relationships. Like a lot of times we think that who we fall in love with, who we date, who we become friends with, we think it's very random. A lot of it is not. So in chapter 9, we're going to look very specifically at how different sexes look for very different things in intimate relationships. That there are some things that men and women share. There are other things where we're looking for very different stuff, Maisha. It's really important to understand that, because a lot of times, again, like, there'll be confusion over this divergence. We want to look at, again, what's going to cause us to help people. We're going to look at what causes aggressive behavior. So we saw the aggressive behavior at the Capitol last week. We want to look at what causes those kind of things. Again, I told you before that this is the most violent country in the world. Is it because we're just naturally violent, or is it something else? We're going to unpack this in great detail in chapter 11. Then in this final section, we're going to look at how social psychology helps us understand questions about law, business, and health. We won't get into this as much. But one of the things, again, as leaders yourselves, how can you as a business leader, Ron, motivate your employees? We all deal with stress. So what are some of the most effective ways of dealing with it? We'll leave it there for now, but we're going to begin on Thursday by looking again. So Ron, the question that you asked earlier about social psychology and sociology, there's definitely some overlap, but we'll explore a little bit more deeply what some of the differences are. And then we'll begin to unpack why social psychology is a science and how you should approach it scientifically as we go through it on the rest of the course. Michael, again, make sure that you get access to the book and begin reading from chapter 1 if you have not started already. I hope that you got a lot of this. I hope that you all got a lot out of lecture today, but please be mindful that you won't fully get it if you don't read this yourself. As I told you before, this is really important to me, man. Do not take my word for stuff. Get into the habit of doing your own research and being your own advocate and relying on yourself for information and knowledge above anybody else. Anybody have any questions before we leave for the day? Maisha, I'm going to try really hard to upload this again onto my Allen. I'll keep you all posted. And I'll see you all on Thursday at 2:30.
All right, yes, sir.
All right, you have a good one.
Have a good one.